Interactive media is just like any other media, meaning if the story is good, it's going to work on interactive media. If the story is bad, it's not going to work. So I think it doesn't have to have a feature as such. It has to be a good story. Then you can add some layers in interactive, meaning you can ask the audience to participate, which is kind of the new element from interactive. But really, I don't think we should look after a feature. We should look more after a story and then use the technology to tell the story and to engage the audience in a different way. But there's no feature that you have to have. I wouldn't think so. It's interesting because I mean, there's been tons of documentary made on Fort McMurray as such, so I don't think the world needed a new one. But interactivity allowed us to tell the story a different way. And what we wanted to underline in Fort McMurray is that it's not only the story of Fort McMurray and oil sands itself, it's a story of our society and how we perceive it and how we take decisions around it. So by getting people to vote and to express themselves on the issues that are underlined in the project, you get people to get a different grip on what's going on. Like if you, I don't know, you decide you as a player that you're going to raise taxes, for example. Of course, it's going to bring more money to the city, but then again, it's going to decrease the money that comes from the oil companies. And then it's going to increase, I don't know, the price of housing, for example, and so it's going to increase homelessness. So that's what we wanted to show to the users and the players, is that there is no easy decision in a case like Fort McMurray. And that's what interactivity helps us to achieve, and I think that's the value-added component of not doing something linear, but doing something interactive. Mm-hmm. It was really a platform of discussion between people who are for, people who are against, and I think that's an element also that worked. Now, retroactively, I think the game is a bit too complex, so probably it did put off some people because they didn't quite get how the game was working as a whole. But frankly, the number of users we had and the number of hardcore gamers that we had and came on the project and did the project from the beginning to the end was kind of actually encouraging. A linear story is as old as humanity, probably. I mean, since humans were able to communicate, they were telling stories to one another. To me, there's no competition between interactive formats and linear formats. I think they're totally different usages, and there's no competition between book and film, for example. And as such, I don't think there's a competition between linear format and interactive format. I think they're just very complementary. They're a different way of telling a story. And if you take Fort McMurray, it's a great example because not only was there an interactive feature, but there was also a linear feature, which doesn't tell the same story as a different angle, but they both tell a story about this place, and they're complementary to one another, they don't compete. It's a real challenge because it's a moving media, meaning like if you take a film or a book or whatever, once it's finished and you can put it on a shelf and it's not going to move, and the movie that was shot 50 years ago is probably, I mean, you're going to have different screen sizes, of course, but it's going to be basically the same movie with the same sound and so on. With interactive media, it's a bit different because it's really moving all the time. Like every time someone adds a comment in the project, every time someone plays, every time someone takes a decision, it makes the project evolve. So you have a real challenge of when is the project finished. And basically it's never finished, and that's kind of one of the difficult parts in terms of archival. The second part is the technology, of course. So if we knew when the project was finished, the point is not only that we have to archive the project by itself, but we have to archive the technology that allows you to read the project. So I'm just going to take a quick example. There was this game made at the beginning of the year 2000 by the NFB, a game for children. which was developed using a technology called, I don't know the name, I forgot the name, but a shockwave actually. And so a couple of years later, like 10 years later, the NFB said, well, you know, as an homage, we should re-release this project. Except shockwave doesn't exist anymore, doesn't work on any computer anymore. So they decide, okay, we're going to adapt it to Flash. But then there is no computer that's able to reopen the project and to allow it to edit it. So you really get into a problematic of software obsolescence, where a generation of software die very rapidly, and you really lose the way to archive things. Versus in film, I mean, film is pretty straightforward, but I think for interactive it's really a challenge, and I think nobody has a real efficient solution at that point. Well, Minitel happened, I think it was a research from France Télécom at that point, and so it kind of got developed. It was at the same time that it was even a bit before internet kind of became something. I think it survived a long time because a lot of French institutions used it, like you used it for reserving train tickets, whatever. But it ultimately died because of the internet. But the interesting point is I have, at Arte we have this thing called teletext, maybe you have that in Poland as well. And teletext is basically even worse than Minitel. It's even the generation before. It's not really interactive, you can't do anything, but it's still immensely popular in Germany because it's reassuring, people know where stuff is, and it's easy access to information. They don't have to put themselves in front of a computer. So you have technologies like teletext or Minitel or whatever, who takes years and years and years to die because people are just used to them. And I would say there's almost a competition between teletext and internet because it's so pregnant in Germany. I mean, people really use it, and so it's really old-timeish. It really looks like nothing, but it's still very used, and that's typically the type of technology that still survive to my big amazement, I have to say.